Thank you and welcome everybody to as part of the International E-Waste Day, is to highlight the growing issue of electronic waste and promoting responsible e-waste management. This year's theme is to recycle anything with a plug, battery or cable, highlighting the issue of invisible e-waste, the electronic items that often go unrecognized and are not properly recycled within the appropriate waste streams. This evening's webinar will hopefully give us some insight as to our role to play in reducing the e-waste environmental footprint. Our webinar this evening is about quantifying and reducing the carbon footprint of our IT infrastructure. Our two speakers, Rory Choudhuri, who's the Solutions Marketing Director of Cloud EMEA at VMware, and Vern, who is the lead cloud solution architect at VMware Cloud. Rory is going to talk about the corporate data centers consuming significant and increasing proportion of world's energy. Managing carbon emissions and e-waste requires a structural approach. So join us for a discussion on setting targets, measuring carbon footprints, and taking action to reduce emissions and reporting on progress. We'll also be discussing our own approach and history in realms of sustainability from an IT and an organizational perspective. Rory Choudhuri is a Solutions Marketing Director for VMware, responsible for defining and amplifying the benefits of VMware Cloud portfolio. This portfolio provides the platform for customers to integrate private, public, edge, and hybrid clouds to enable their digital transformation and application modernization journeys. Rory is also the VMware Sustainability Ambassador, with a long history of driving this topic with his customers and partners. Vern Bolinius is the Cloud Solution Architect. He's business-focused solution architect with 25 years experience in the IT industry. His experience includes roles as instructor, consultant, engineer, architect, and business owner. An avid evangelist of VMware Cloud, Vern enjoys presenting and discussing cloud solutions with partners and customers alike. Vern also focuses on sustainability. In his role as VMware Sustainability Ambassador, Vern engages in discussions on all aspects of carbon footprint reduction. When not behind a laptop and in front of an audience, Vern enjoys travel and time outdoors, running, canoeing, hiking, and camping. I hope you will enjoy this evening's session as we hand over to our two speakers who will inspire us with this topic. Thank you.
Thank you, Santana. I would like to start with a quote on the screen, not from the Margaret that's with us today, but from Margaret Mead. Never doubt that a small group of committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. I'd like you all to bear that in mind as we go through our conversation and our discussion today. With that, welcome to Quantifying and Reducing the Carbon Footprint of Your IT Infrastructure. I was prepped to do a full intro, but honestly, when someone else intros you, it sounds a lot better than if you're doing it yourself. So I won't add a whole heck of a lot to that, other than, as Santana said, I'm a lead solution architect, and it's the other hat that I'm wearing, the EMEA Sustainability Ambassador. That's key here, where both myself and Rory, but I'll let Rory speak for himself, where we have the opportunity to talk to partners, to customers internally, and raise awareness of sustainability, things that can be done, tangible things that can be done to reduce carbon footprint. And today we're taking that slightly different spin on e-waste as part of International Celebration of E-Waste Day, where we are going to look at it from a corporate perspective. What can corporations do? What are they doing to address carbon footprint? Rory.
Thanks, Vern. And thank you to everyone who's logged in. Great to see you. And thank you for letting us talk to you about our experience in this area. So as Vern said, we both work for VMware, but our day jobs are slightly less relevant to this. The fact is we've both been talking about, haranguing, badgering, proselytizing, evangelizing about sustainability within the organization for many years now. What is great is that more and more we're seeing much more, the topic being much more accepted. So what we thought we'd do is to give you a sense of the path we've trodden and what lessons we've learned, and what we can bring to market, and what we can bring to you to help you bring the ideas forward in your organizations. So less about what VMware does and much more about how what we've experienced might be relevant and useful. We do have, as Santana said, we have some prepared slide material, but we'd really love your participation. We're going to ask you to participate in a couple of polls, but also just questions. We've got plenty of time at the end for questions, so jot the questions down and we'll try and respond as best we can. Vern's going to lead, and I'll jump in as he lets me. Go, Vern.
The presentation, I'll start with how the presentation came about. It's an interesting, cute little story. So I was delivering a workshop on one of VMware's sustainability, or one of VMware's disaster recovery solutions, which is inherently sustainable. And I'd opened up the discussion to a group largely of corporations, asking what each of them was doing in the sustainability field within their own organization. And we had a great discussion. And Santana was in the room, and Santana came up to me afterwards and said, what you've been talking about on sustainability from a corporate perspective would be a great topic for conversation as we go through as we do our e-waste day. And so would you be prepared? Would you be willing to go and have that discussion with the group? I said, that would be fantastic, because sustainability is near and dear to our heart. It's an important thing to raise awareness. But all of that to say and echo what Rory was saying, this is for you. So don't hesitate at any point to stop us. I have on my other screen here everyone's name, so I know all your names. Some of you have pictures up. Feel free to put on your camera, stop, ask questions, and get an honest discussion going. And we're going to start that with this poll. How far along is your organization in its sustainability journey? It doesn't mean it has to be a huge corporation. So if you would, please use your mobile phones to scan the QR code, or if you prefer, in the bottom left there, www.menti.com, have a code, and you'll be faced with 4 choices. I'll go back to the code in a sec, but these are your choices, starting to acknowledge there's a crisis. Have you published sustainability goals, formulating plans to address sustainability? I see some of you are already voting. Thank you. Making documented progress towards a sustainability goal. So again, let me leave this on just for a second for those of you that want to type the code or do a rescan, and then we'll go back. When we were in the workshop, the workshop on this DR product, it was mixed. A lot of organizations are doing a lot of different things. So with that, let me go back, and what have we got here? Okay, I see there's 47 people in our meeting today. That includes Rory and myself, who are probably not allowed to vote.
Oh, I already did. I'm the one on the right.
Oh, okay, this is good. It's an interesting mix. I'm glad to see that at least no one is not starting to acknowledge that there is a crisis, because that would be wrong.
We should have had another
maybe
crisis.
Maybe we should have. Okay, so most of you are or your organizations are in the starting to acknowledge that there's a crisis, which is great. Published sustainability goals, a little better, even better, formulating plans. And number 2 and number 3 there kind of go hand in hand. So you need to have some kind of goal with a plan really before you publish, so they're kind of interlinked. But I also really like making documented progress towards achieving sustainability targets. Again, one of the nice things about a presentation or a venue like this is you can see what your peers and colleagues are doing on the subject, and we can talk openly because this is a useful use of the seminar. Okay, thank you everyone for filling that out. I will have another poll later on, but let's talk about what we're going to discuss. So here's our agenda for this evening. First, we're going to talk about the challenges. I'm sure we're all aware of the energy crisis. For the past 7 years, I've been based in London, specifically in Putney, for those of you that know the area. And so I've not only corporately, but I've been faced firsthand with the rising costs of electricity. And so we'll talk about the corporate use of electricity in data centers, as well as some of the things that have brought sustainability to the fore. We'll talk about how corporations are planning, what they need to do to plan and register that plan to move forward. What kind of things can be measured? Let me pause here on the measurement. Rory, you can chime in here. There are a number of different things that you can measure from a sustainability perspective. From IT, a lot of those are related to electricity, but not all. But the key here, and someone once said something that I completely agree with, we don't need 1 million individuals or corporations doing sustainability perfectly. What we need is 10 million individuals or corporations doing a mediocre job, because that's the way we'll move forward. So don't let perfection stand in the way of making a start. Rory, did you want to add to just that one piece there?
What I would add is just that in conversations with customers, with other vendors, with partners, that's the one that comes up the most, particularly with organizations that have started down the path. They recognize there's an issue. They know they want to do better. Some have even published goals like net zero by 2035 or whatever it happens to be. Their biggest challenge is measurement. And in some ways, measurement in IT is easier, as Vern said. Measurement in other areas can be more difficult or expensive. And we need to figure out how we do this. We have some answers. We have by no means all the answers.
And we'd love to hear what some of you are doing as we go through the couple of slides. We're not very heavy on slides here. Again, it's more about a discussion, and I'm keeping my eye on the chat. But before you can execute, you need to measure. You can't improve upon something that you haven't established a baseline for in the first place. But in execute, we'll make some suggestions on things you can do as a corporation, tangible things that you can do to reduce your carbon footprint, and then how to report on them, because there are a number of agencies that specifically are focused on what's becoming the science of carbon reporting. And then lastly, and Rory mentioned this when we began, we'll talk about a journey. We'll talk about our journey and some of the progress that customers have made using some of the measures and using some of the steps that we're going to discuss and execute. But if anything here departs from what you yourself are seeing, we would absolutely love to hear it. So with that, let's start to talk about the challenges. And I know we're all aware that there's an energy crisis. I can tell because we had that first vote. This is a slide that I like to use, even though it's slightly dated. I'll admit this is data from 2014. And it's a skewed, perhaps, picture, but it still tells a good story. So this is around electricity consumption globally of the IT community of data centers. And you can see that if we were a country, IT would be the third largest consumer of electricity in the world. Look at the stats on the left, and these are low. They've gone up since. They'll consume more than 2% of the world's electricity. I've had stats ranging from 2% to above 10%. We emit as much CO2 as the airline industry, which seems almost incomprehensible. And we're growing fast, 6% annually. Again, that's low. With I won't say the advent of machine learning and AI, but with those technologies becoming prevalent and the sheer electricity, the sheer server time that's required to train something like ChatGPT as a large language model, that is only going up. Rory, did you want to comment on this?
Yeah, so I think the other thing that's important is that growing fast piece, because the airline industry are getting their arms around the problem, like it or not. Fuel getting more efficient, airlines getting more efficient. So they're doing the right thing. And as Vern said, at the same time, we come up with new use cases or new ways of doing IT, cloud being a prime offender. And we are unquestionably, by the end of this year, going to be a larger outputter of carbon and carbon dioxide equivalent than the airline industry. We're heading straight for being sustainability public enemy #1. So that's the major issue that we see, and it's it is finite. What is good is that there are there's a lot of awareness within IT vendors, both on the hardware, software, and services side, and we're starting to see better provision. We're starting to see, better data, better reporting, but also starting to see organizations and vendors be more responsible with how they build their products and services, and that's heartening.
In the chat, I have a comment from Dio who makes the point that these stats are old. And so, yes, I have seen other things that there are more updated stats, which are even scarier. But I just like the format of this stat showing the IT sector ranked amongst the countries. And when I look at this, what I see is, based on the electricity consumption of the IT community, anything that we as an IT organization, as a society, can do to reduce the carbon footprint, to reduce our electric consumption, we should take those measures, even if they're small, because globally they'll make a difference. Dio, hopefully that answers or addresses your concern. Again, I appreciate you being the first poster in the chat. Everyone, keep it coming. So let's move on to some of the things that are forcing sustainability to the top of the stack as a business imperative. And each of these are well worth taking a look at. So a lot of the Fortune 500 companies have climate-related targets. These are all backed. You can see in the lower right there, the various organizations from which these stats come. But mandated regulatory reporting. So 50,000 companies require to report on sustainability metrics. And just in the chat here, as we go through, how many of you are part of an organization that is expected to report, that has an obligation, a regulatory obligation, let's say, to report on your sustainability metrics? Just a yes or no. Just let's have a couple of things go through the chat here. I want to make sure none of you are sleeping. I mean, I know it is, it's past 6:30, but still. Imminent. Unsure. That's fair, Steve. Thank you. Hey, Steve. So no's, Emma, Robert, thank you. Okay, so we're across the board, like when we did the poll. Not sure, that's fair. And no. Okay. Thank you all. Appreciate the input. How about rising energy and carbon costs? So 35% increase in consumer electricity service prices in the EU. And of course, that's us in Britain as well, right? Again, I've been, as a Putney resident, I've certainly seen my personal electricity bills go up. So rising energy and carbon costs. And it's an interesting thing here because, and it's a good thing, to be more sustainable means reducing in IT, means reducing electricity costs. And of course, reducing electricity usage. And of course, reducing electricity usage cuts down cost. And that's a good hand-in-hand thing. Pressure to reduce emissions coming from the C-level. So 37% more CEOs have sustainability as one of their top priorities. And a growing distributed workforce. This can have a number of different things, but that 10%, there's the 10% world's energy consumed by data centers, as opposed to the 2% in a previous slide. So this is just going up. So these are four main contributors, four challenges as to why sustainability is rising in the charts. Rory, again, comments on this?
Just to say, first off, I posted a link to IEA report, which suggests that pure electricity consumption alone is about 1.3, 1.4%, and crypto mining is 0.4% all on its own. That's before the advent of private AI, etc. The other thing I'll comment on the pressure to reduce emissions. I'm certainly hearing from loads of C and C-1 level contacts that they're seeing shareholder activism, they're seeing pressure from customers, they're seeing pressure from partners. So we sort of start going into the scope 1, scope 2, scope 3 discussion, which we might get to later in the conversation.
And the financial bits are tangible. You'll see that as well in the slide from the Carbon Disclosure Project. For those that are all thinking, oh, this is a great idea, let's save the planet. Of course it's a great idea, let's save the planet. But don't think for a minute that there aren't financial implications for this. So those are the challenges. Does anyone, again, if there's anything specific that you see within your own organization, that's a challenge that has driven sustainability higher on your C-levels list of priorities, share it in the chat. Everyone else will be able to see it and comment on it. Let's talk about a plan. Again, this is from a corporate perspective. So your corporation, you've decided that, yes, we're harming the planet. What can we do about it? How do we go about planning and then registering that plan so that everyone can see it, follow it, that we're held to meeting our objectives? So there are a number of different ways to do it, but I'm using a specific example here that many organizations choose. So there's an institute called the Science-Based Targets Institute, or SBTI, through which you can register your intent. And I'll mark it up here. I'll use my pen on Zoom. So you can register your intent. And in this case, this is Nike, as you can see. So that Nike has stated that they want to keep global warming below 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is the most aggressive target classification. So they worked with the SBTI to set reasonable targets. And reasonable is the key here, right? If you go and you say, hey, you know what? We're going to shut off all the lights in our office and we're going to keep global warming to below 1.5%. Well, if it was that easy, that would be great. But it has to be realistic. And so you work with an institution like SBTI, and they will check you. It's a very low cost for an organization to do this. I think I remember it was like $2,000. So it's an incremental cost. You show them their plan, you show them your plan, they vet your plan, they say, yep, this is something that is viable. You can go and publish it, and they'll publish it themselves as well. So this is Nike, and you can see here that Nike sets a target to reduce scope 1 and scope 2 greenhouse gas emissions by 65% by 2030 from a baseline in 2015, and also scope 3 greenhouse gas emissions by 30%. So for those that are unaware, just a quick classification here. Scope 1 are greenhouse gases that you as an organization produce directly. As an example, you are a courier company. You have lorries that go back and forth. They burn fuel. They create carbon emissions. That is directly attributable to your organization. That's your scope 1. Scope 2 is a big piece of what we face in the IT organization, and it's generally around electrical usage. There's an electrical provider. You are using the electricity from the provider. So their scope 1 emissions would be whatever they have to do to produce the electricity. But as the user, as the consumer of that electricity, that's your scope 2. The more you use, the greater your scope 2 emissions. And for simplicity, scope 3 is pretty much anything else. So they are, Rory alluded to this earlier, they are the emissions that come from your partners or your suppliers, which are positive or negative to you, depending on how well they're doing. There's scope 1, scope 2, scope 3. Rory, did you want to add to that a bit?
No, I think you explained that perfectly.
Okay. Good stuff here on the chat is good. Yeah, supply chains, Office 365 is a good example. Software as a service. Why does a company have to make a plan with, say, SBTI? Why don't they just do it themselves? So they do. Rory, do you want to speak to that? Because we do that internally. In fact, we have an entire organization for it.
Yeah. So it's a really good question, Rahul. At the end of the day, it's to do with how you report it and how you advertise to the world. So by all means, most organizations can and should have their own targeting, right? We certainly do at VMware. But if you want, to have almost like an industry stamp, it really helps to work with agencies. And SBTI are just a good one for setting targets. because they publish exactly how those targets are set, how they're measured, and how you progress against them. Just a little aside, I was asked some 3 or 4 months ago to be a judge on the Global Good Awards, and I was astonished at how many entries were organizations creating dashboards and measurement capabilities for precisely this area, setting targets, measuring progress, reporting on sustainability. It was just extraordinary. You almost need one dashboard to help you choose which of the 400 dashboards out there would be appropriate for your organization.
And we can show you some of those dashboards, and will in a little bit, but that's excellent. And I think it's indicative of the way corporations are going, the fact that so many people are focused on that. And it doesn't take a lot necessarily to get something tangible going, just so you can see what you're doing, even if it's only internal. But externally, the next step in this journey of, after you've gone and you've made a plan, whether you're doing that internally or whether you're doing it through something like SBTI. And hopefully, Rahul, that answers your question on chat as to why they don't do themselves. And again, everyone, please feel free, ask questions in the chat. We love it. So let's talk about the Carbon Disclosure Project, or CDP. So it's a non-for-profit charity, and they do the global disclosures. There are other corporations as well, other sustainability metrics that are kept by other organizations, and I'll talk about that a little later on. But CDP is open to pretty much everyone: investors, companies, cities, states, corporations. And once you've gone and you've published with CDP, this is key, investors can go to CDP and look to see how well you're tracking against your carbon objectives, and then they'll decide whether or not they're going to invest in you. And the same thing is true with partners. So bear that in mind. Again, this is not just altruistic. This is a very real thing. When you commit, when you publish, and then you have your stats followed. That's CDP. So we've talked about the planning phase in brief. We've talked about the publishing phase, again, in brief, and there are other organizations that do it. But once you've planned and you've published that plan, you now have to figure out how you're going to measure and how you're going to improve. So let's talk about that. So measuring is next. Again, no measurement, you can't argue that you've made improvements. These are the components of a data center carbon footprint. Some of these are things that you might be thinking of. Others sometimes catch people by surprise. But this is a whole package. Even though we'll focus most of our discussion on electricity, these are things that are interesting to bear in mind. So it's not just the usage, the life cycle, it's the construction, the manufacturing, the operations, and the end of life. All of that forms data center carbon footprint. IT equipment. Yeah, you've got your servers, but you have your networking, you have your storage. What about your uninterruptible power supply? Lighting, cooling, heating. All of these are factors. For large data centers, or pretty much any data center, there's backup power that needs to be considered. You're burning diesel fuel, that's a Scope 1 emission. Cooling refrigerant, R22. A little aside on that. Cooling refrigerants are toxic. They are horrible as far as greenhouse gas emissions are concerned, far more so than CO2. So what you'll often see, some of you I realize are already aware of this, but what you'll often see is written CO2e, CO2 equivalent. So CO2 is the normalizing factor. And so cooling refrigerant, that cooling refrigerant, let's say it's 5,000 times worse than CO2. So for 1 metric ton of cooling refrigerant that leaks, because leakage happens, that is the equivalent damage to the atmosphere, or to the ozone layer, of 5,000 metric tons of CO2. So you'll often see CO2 driven. Or Rory, do you want to comment on the footprint piece here?
I do, because there are a couple of things that, because the danger we have when we talk about sustainability is it's all doom and gloom, right? And Vern made the point earlier that you need 10 million people to do a little bit, even if they do it badly. And little changes make a massive difference. So a couple of examples: Google, huge organization, millions of servers in data centers around the world. An engineer at Google figure out a way to reduce the power consumption of their servers by 1 watt, and they saved $250 million. And the carbon output was reduced commensurately. Similarly, IBM did an experiment with a data center near Basingstoke, and they ran the data center 1 degree centigrade hotter than they had been. They went from 17 to 18 degrees centigrade. And in just that one data center, they saved multiple tons of CO2 equivalent. And of course, they saved money as well. So it doesn't have to be radical to make a significant difference. And I appreciate that IBM and Google are very large organizations, but that's the scale of change that can happen from really small adjustments.
Something absolutely something to bear in mind. And again, I'll stand by that comment that you don't need a whole bunch of people doing a perfect job. You need more people doing a mediocre job. Here are things that you can actively measure. And again, focusing on the major sources here, it won't be perfect, and that's okay. The idea is to quantify activity for each type of emission, convert it to a CO2 equivalent, and then report on it. So here's some things. Let's take a look at IT equipment. Where can you get data for your electricity consumption for your IT equipment? You can see the list there. If you go to your server racks, server rack power data, or from the UPS itself, remember your uninterruptible power supply. If you are maintaining your own data center, or if you're in a co-location facility, either way, you can get invoices that show your power consumption. Most server manufacturers, and I'll show you an example in a minute, produce carbon footprints for their equipment, how much it took to make it, how much it's expected to use in its lifetime, what happens when it's at end of life. So all of that information is published right up front when you make the commitment, the decision to buy that specific model of server. Also, information management systems, IPMI power data, all of that is available within the data center at a corporate level to get your statistics. And of course, nothing is perfect. I'm not generally a betting man, but I'm willing to bet that some of those will not agree with some of the others. And that's okay. Do the best you can to get the best measurement that you can. Rory?
Nothing to add.
Okay. I'll build this slide out. So DC operations, construction, and manufacturing all have different sources to which you can go to gather your power data, your cooling system. This one here, I want to do a quick comment on for those that are unaware, the DC power utilization. It's a ratio. Power utilization efficiency. It's a measure of how much power your data center uses versus how much power is used by your servers. Because really the purpose of the data center is to host servers. And so if it's a 3-to-1 ratio or even a 2-to-1 ratio, that's horrible. It means you're using twice as much power to do things like your heating, your cooling, your lights, etc. And that power is not going into the main purpose of the data center, the servers. And so large organizations that do a very, very efficient job will find they have a PUE of 1 or 1.1 or 1.2. So you're using very little extra power for your data center than that which goes into the servers. So that's something to strive for.
I would
likewise. Oh, go ahead, Rory.
Let me just interject a point, Vern, which is that as organizations start to use more cloud from public cloud providers, more and more of the cloud providers are being very public and transparent about the PUE ratings they have. And more importantly, they're doing it by data center. So, if you're using a data center in Iceland, it's going to be really clean energy and it's going to be, highly efficient, as opposed to if you use one in, I don't know, Poland or Germany where it's more coal powered. That's, the basic logic, but it's good to have the cloud providers and Microsoft, Amazon, Google, Oracle, name all the major hyperscalers are really starting to be upfront about this. So you can make intelligent decisions, not just by, I don't know, speed, latency, cost, services, etc., but also, more importantly now, you have the option to make decisions on which is the cleanest cloud provider I can use that matches my company's needs?
There are algorithms. Now, honestly, I don't think we're quite there yet because of data sovereignty, but there are algorithms that will take real-time feeds from the data centers that Rory mentions, who's using the cleanest power. And in this day and age of virtual machines or containers, it doesn't really take much to stop a container running in one data center and starting that container up at scale, shutting down 1,000 containers and starting 1,000 other containers up, moving them from Italy to Iceland, as an example, and suddenly reducing the carbon footprint by 50%. Or if you're within one country with different electricity providers, and suddenly you find that, hey, there is cheaper, cleaner electricity at another data center, you can move those. Again, we're not quite there because of data sovereignty. It's not like you can be in Germany and then want to go and move to Iceland, for example, but I think we're moving closer. So once you have your, let me just change the slide here. Once you've gone and you have your measurements, wait, let me add this one thing. I promised I'd speak about this. We talked, if I go back a slide, we talked here about server, manufacturer, and power data. This is an example of a Dell server. This is a Dell PowerEdge R640. And Dell publishes this along with the server. You're going to buy a Dell server. Dell will tell you up front that the estimated carbon footprint throughout the life cycle of this server is about 7,000 kilograms of CO2 equivalent. And you can see from the pie chart breakdown, the vast majority of that by far is the use of the server. So that's the electricity that it consumes, the watts that it sucks down over its lifetime. Transportation is a small part. The manufacturing of the server, well, as you can imagine, putting that box together with its various components, its CPU, its RAM, its disks, and each of those components has a different carbon footprint. That's about 25%, about a quarter of it, and then a very small amount is how it gets discarded at the end of life. Is it done properly? What carbon is taken in order to destroy that server or recycle that server in the spirit of e-waste? So addressing that big chunk, that 72%, almost 3/4 of it, that's all electrical consumption. And that's what we're focused on. So this is not a poll. This is a chat question. What is your organization's largest contributor to e-waste and carbon emissions? And we'd appreciate if you didn't say your boss, or if you did say your boss, you can name him or her. But just in the chat, what's your organization's largest contributor? We'll keep an eye on this here, and we'll have a little discussion around it. Rory, what would you say is our largest as far as e-waste and carbon emissions?
Good question. I'm trying to figure that one out. I would say our development environments, given that we have something like 13, 14 developers around the globe, and we have a fair amount of their development being done in public clouds as well as our own private clouds. I think that probably is our single largest contributor, but I'd be curious to see if you have a different view. That's my guess.
No, I'll make comment on this, and some of you can take a look at this later. We have an ESG, so environmental social governance report an annual report that we put out every year. And I of course read through it, but it doesn't stick out what is our largest contributor within that report. But that's the kind of thing that you should expect to find organizations to publish. Then as I see that the chat is relatively quiet here, so no one is going to either fess up or don't know, and that's okay. Not knowing your organization's largest contributor to e-waste. But here we go. For carbon emissions, Emma, thank you. Here we go. Steve, Research Institute's high performance compute. Yes, that's a big one. High performance compute is going to use a lot of electricity. Carbon emissions, heating the buildings, also constructing new buildings and building upgrades. So Emma, thank you for that. I didn't highlight this, but let me go back a couple slides. So this here, I'll highlight it now. The Embodied Carbon in Construction Calculator, or EC3. It's an open source tool, which will tell you how much carbon is being used in the construction of a building. It's kind of cool to take a look at. the different building materials that are being used all factor in to the carbon consumption. And so again, this is not just electricity. This is, hey, we're building out of brick versus wood versus steel. What does that look like from a carbon consumption perspective? What can we do to reduce those? Excellent point. Thank you, Emma. Well, what else do we have? So Rory has highlighted in chat, thank you, Rory, a link to our ESG report. We also have that on the last slide of our presentation and you'll get a copy of this presentation. Right. So we have planned, we've published our plan. We have done some measurements to see where we're at now. So we have a benchmark. Now it's all great to raise awareness, but now we need to execute. Awareness is something that's good, but awareness alone is not going to get us to where we need to be. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through 4 different ways which corporations can, and some do, reduce their carbon footprint. I like this slide, not just because we're VMware and have our roots in virtualization, but this paints a really terrific picture. And it doesn't have to be VMware virtualization, right? It can be Microsoft, it can be Hyper-V, it can be KVM, it doesn't matter. But this slide shows from 2003 to 2019, the amount of carbon that was avoided through use of virtualization technology. So 130 million servers were not deployed. And again, when we speak of e-waste and disposing of those, the best way to worry about not having to dispose of it is not having to produce it in the first place. 2.1 million gigawatt hours. And this stat here always gives me shivers. 1.2 billion metric tons of CO2 equivalent were avoided from 2003 through 2019 simply by virtualization. And that 2019 stat is 3.6% of the global CO2 emissions avoided through virtualization. It's really a key thing. I'm guessing, and I think this is a fair guess, most of you with large corporations have some type of virtualization going, right? And again, it doesn't matter what kind of virtualization that is, but you're virtualized to some degree. For those that are, actually, let's do this, just sort of off the cuff in the chat again, if you don't mind. To what percent do you think your organization is virtualized? Bearing in mind that not everyone can be virtualized, depending on what you do, what your sector is. But I'm curious. So just type a number in the chat: 60%, 70%, 10% virtualized. Because there's what I found personally in the field is that not everything can be virtualized. I accept that, I respect that, and there's a number of reasons for it. But virtualization still continues, not just virtualization of servers, but of networks, of storage. So there's still room for growth. And what I mean by growth, I mean reduction in carbon emissions through virtualization. Let's just take a look at the chat here. What do we got? Chat is silent.
Yeah, I think, come on, folks, let's have some stuff in the chat. I just want to call out, Vern, these numbers are specific to VMware. So
that's fair.
The 1.2 billion metric tons was from VMware's virtualization. So the other virtualization technologies you mentioned, KVM, Microsoft Azure, Hyper-V, sorry, not Azure, Hyper-V, etc., added to that. So, it's accretive.
And good point. And again, the number is mind blowing, right? 1.2 or higher than 1.2, given this is just VMware virtualization alone. Okay, thanks, Steve. About 60% research impacts as requires GPUs. So virtualize, number one. Second, and Rory has alluded to this, so let's drill down on this. Leveraging cloud providers. So these are the hyperscalers that Rory mentioned earlier. In this case, I'm showing just 2: AWS, Microsoft. Google is in the same boat, Alibaba, what have you. The truth is that as an organization, excuse me, you cannot at scale manage, or odds are really good that you cannot at scale manage your data center as efficiently as AWS or as Microsoft, whose job it is to manage data centers. Not only that, both these organizations and Google are sworn to get to a clean energy state. So they're using all green energy, different times like 2030 or 2035, but they're both committed to it. So look at what I've highlighted here, an efficiency of scale in AWS. So down here, AWS infrastructure, 3.6 times more energy efficient than the median in the US, and 5 times more efficient than a European data center. That's significant. So here in Microsoft, 93% more energy efficient, up to 98% more carbon efficient than on-prem solutions. Again, significant. So what this means is that if you are in an organization that can benefit by moving your workloads to cloud, you should do that. Not everyone can. Again, I understand that. But leveraging cloud providers means that you immediately take advantage of clean energy and more efficient data centers. Rory?
Yeah, I'm far more cynical than Vern in life generally, and particularly with cloud providers. So
that's true.
But I will say that, you know, a well-run data center can get close to this, but the PUE and the carbon efficiency, etc., that you're seeing from these organizations is setting a standard. And I think we can see ourselves moving that way. Part of it is just an appetite for consolidation. You know, we know from our experience, and Vern, will have seen this with his customers in the field like I have. You know, even when you can run a server at 80-90% efficiency, there's something, conservative about us, and it's worse in Europe than it is in the States. And we still only run it at about 50%. And that's where the difference is. So just being more efficient, running more workloads per server can massively impact the carbon output of your organization. So I call that as one of the areas for an easy win.
It's almost like you knew that this slide was coming.
If you think I've checked the presentation.
This actually goes hand in hand with things that are on the chat. So AP, not sure percentage, but we use VMs unless unsuitable, right? So improving this workload efficiency, this is targeted on VMs. Steve also adds, key with cloud is using efficiency, right sizing, only running VMs instances when needed. So again, thank you. I'll pay you later, guys. It feeds directly into this and the next slide. So number 3, as far as reducing your carbon footprint, is improving your workload efficiency. Now, this slide is actually a slide from a VMware product, but again, there are other tools out there that will allow you to view things like the amount of resources that you can reclaim. And this is because, and Rory was mentioning this, everyone, and really this is pretty much true globally, what I've seen by experience in the field, has VMs that are underutilized, are over provisioned. Also, on the right here, powered off and idle VMs just sitting there using up space. Snapshots, again, disks, orphan disks. Align the size of virtual machines with their true demand. It has a cost factor. Here's how much money could potentially be saved in this organization. This is only $4,000 US, so it's a small organization. But look at some of the things, even in a small org, that can be reclaimed. There's too many CPUs that are being allocated to virtual machines, too much memory. If I go to the next slide here and get rid of the chicken scratch that's on this slide. So here's an example of right sizing. So there's 440 running VMs. Of those, or within those 440 VMs, there's a full terabyte of oversized memory, 565 virtual CPUs. And we all know why this happens, right? The business will come to IT and say, we need a server that has 32 CPUs. And someone will roll their eyes saying, you'll never use 32 CPUs. The most you will ever use for this application is 16 CPUs. Oh, no, we need 32 CPUs. So maybe they compromise. Maybe not. It usually winds up being 32 CPUs. And this allows you to track that, to go back to the business and say, look, you're using 20 CPUs more than you need. You're taking up resources, you're burning electricity. In this day and age where the CEO said, we're going to reduce our carbon footprint by 50%, this isn't helping. This kind of tool gives you the visibility and can publish dashboards to demonstrate that the workload efficiency is not where it should be. Rory, do you want to comment on this one?
No, I think that's fair.
Okay. What else do we have? Anything else in the chat? No, nothing else in the chat. So this goes hand in hand. Improving your workload efficiency and right-sizing your virtual machines means that you can better increase the utilization on the physical platforms. Again, this is another slide from the area operations tool. This is showing how much capacity that you have left and can be tuned to how much capacity you have left of various flavors, right? How much CPU do you have left in your clusters of your hosts? How much memory do you have left? When are you going to run out of storage? Again, this is about identifying oversized and underused resources. Here, different view, same thing. This talks about a data store, 128 data stores. There's the capacity, the VMs, and the running VMs. But down below, shared data stores by capacity remaining, shared data stores by time remaining. It allows you to take a look at your data stores or your clusters to see when you're going to run out of a resource. So if, for example, your tool tells you that you have 60% left in your cluster of unused CPU, and the business comes with a project and says, we need to buy more hosts, we're starting up this project. Well, you can go into the tool, you can do a what if analysis and say, look, even with all the extra compute that you're going to need for your project, you're not going to exceed the spare capacity that we currently have. There's no need, there's no excuse to buy more physical hosts, generate more e-waste, increase your carbon footprint if you can prove that you have the resources available to meet your business's demands. Rory?
Nothing really to add on this. I just want to call out a comment I put in chat, because we've been doing a huge amount of work with NVIDIA, who tend to lead the world on GPUs. And cards on the table, being honest, I mean, the focus for that was very much with AI in mind, but it applies to anything that GPUs are used for. So whatever workloads are being, processed in that way. And I think part of the argument in the past was, oh, well, no, we can't do this because it's a high performance application, therefore it has to run on bare metal. We were seeing some extraordinary results, and I was as flabbergasted as anybody else by this, where we were getting better performance from a virtualized GPU infrastructure than from a bare metal infrastructure. So happy to share more of that info offline or afterwards, but it's worth looking into some of the workloads that you previously would have considered non-virtualizable and looking at that, because they are, the high performance workloads are the ones that are really burning carbon.
It's a really, really good point. And I know that some of you are rolling your eyes thinking, that's a marketing thing. As Rory said, he was flabbergasted by the numbers. And I've seen numbers like that, not just for GPUs. I mean, yes, for GPUs, but other forms of virtualization where the claim has been, oh, it performs better virtualized than it does on bare metal. The thing to remember is that the virtualization is tuned to run these workloads and multiple workloads. So you actually can get better performance. It'll depend on the workload and the resources that are consumed, but it is possible and it's well worth investigating. So those are your 4 methods. Again, these are suggestions. Improve or increase your virtualization. Leverage your public cloud providers. Those hyperscalers can do things that you simply cannot do within your own organization. Improve your workload efficiency and increase utilization. There won't be a test, but there will be a poll. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over to the poll here, and I'm going to change it to this one. Which of the 4 methods would result in the biggest carbon reduction for your organization? Increase virtualization, leverage cloud, improve workload efficiency, or increase utilization. I'm going to veer away from this to go back to here so you can, those that have joined after we did the first poll, go ahead, scan the QR code with your mobile, or go to www.menti.com and type in the code that I have on the screen there. And let's see what you think. Let's see what folks think as far as what they can do, which of those 4 methods best serves them to reduce carbon footprint. Or if you'd like, put something else completely different in the chat. Let's take a look. Oh, increase virtualization. Okay. No leverage cloud. Interesting. Actually, that's really interesting. And I want to delve into that, since cloud is near and dear to my heart. Improve workload efficiency. There we go. Rory, was that you?
No, not guilty this time.
So 1 leverage. So fixing. Okay. Thank you to leverage cloud. I appreciate that. Okay. So everyone take a look at what's on the screen here as far as the graph from the voting poll. So folks are still getting votes, and I appreciate that. Let me go back once more to the QR code. You can scan it. I just spent a few seconds on it, then let's take one final look at the results. Okay. Thank you to everyone who's had the chance to vote. So increasing virtualization, and yes, you saw by that chart how much difference virtualization can make. A few leveraging cloud. Again, I appreciate not everyone can quickly move over to cloud. Oh, someone else just did. Improving workload efficiency and increased utilization. So each of these are very valid methods. And if you have any more that you want to share in the chat, something that your organization is doing that is not covered here, I will happily have that full-on discussion. Okay, thank you, everyone. So let's talk about reporting. You've gone, you've planned, you've published your plans, you've published your carbon objectives. You've measured, you have a benchmark. And then you've started to take steps to improve your carbon footprint. Where do you report that, and how do you report that? Well, I'll build the slide out fully. There are a number of different organizations, carbon accounting agencies, through which you can report. In some cases, through which you have to report. You're a bank, for example, the bottom right here, TCFD would be of interest, Task Force Climate-Related Financial Disclosures. The science of carbon reporting is becoming a big thing, which is why there's so many different agencies, each with a different slant. We talked about the Carbon Disclosure Project, CDP, open pretty much to anybody, whereas the Task Force Climate-Related Financial Disclosures are interested in your carbon savings as they relate to finances. Some organizations report or have been given kudos through the Dow Jones Sustainability Indices or indexes. The Sustainability Accounting Standards Board is sector focused, but is very good as far as the name implies, setting standards for how and what is going to be reported as Scope 1, Scope 2, or Scope 3 emissions. VMware ourselves reports up through the Sustainable Accounting Standards Board. Rory, did you want to add to any of this, or the take of any of this?
I think it's just really good because, along with how do I measure, one of the other questions that we get asked a lot is what is good? What does good look like? How much is good? If I reduce by 2%, am I doing well? And I think having a benchmark across an industry, across multiple industries, across a geography, a country or a region, just really helps with the whole conversation, with measurement, and of course with reporting.
I'm looking through the chat as well. Thank you for answering some of the questions. Those of you who haven't had a chance, go through, take a look at the chat. There's a lot of good stuff in there. David Owen, which gives more bang for the buck as far as the different things are concerned. This goes back to the previous slides on the methods. Yeah, so again, you will find that you will need to report through carbon accounting agencies, but if you're not going to do this publicly, there are ways to do things internally. And again, I'm going to bring up an example from VMware, the VMware Green Score. This is made available through a number of tools. And essentially what it allows you to do is set a benchmark, publish that benchmark internally through dashboards, which your C-level can see, and probably stay attuned to, and then watch the improvement and do a re-benchmarking over time. So the green score, as the slide shows, is a combination of different things. The green score is broken up into clean demand, which is how much demand does your business actually require to get around the oversizing or undersizing. So that breaks down into the workload efficiency and the resource utilization. So, workload efficiency. Lean operation is resource utilization and the extent to which you're virtualized. And finally, green supply, which forms 50% of the green score, takes into account your power source. So how much green energy are you drawing versus how much non-green energy, and your hardware efficiency. The hardware efficiency, this goes back to that Dell server. An interesting thing with hardware efficiency, this is a couple of different things. So hardware efficiency is how much are you putting onto that physical host, but also older servers are not as efficient as newer servers. And so there's a line between how long am I going to keep the server and not throw it away, so not generating the e-waste or throwing the server away, and of course the financial implications of not having to buy new servers, versus I have a bunch of new servers which are far more hardware energy efficient than my 5-year-old Dells that really should have been let go 2 years ago. So something to bear in mind. And you get metrics out of this. You have a green score rating. You can see what your power consumption is, what your carbon footprint looks like, what your environmental impact is. These are great things to look at internally and to flag, to highlight, to be proud of, to make available through links to everyone in the organization. Look how well we're doing as far as reducing our green score. Or conversely, hey, we have to be careful. We're not doing as well as we said we would, as well as we said we published. Rory, chat on this?
Yeah, I think a couple of things. So we've certainly seen organizations use this and other tools to help with that decision on, look, back when I started, you refreshed your hardware every 3 years, whether it needed it or not, right? And we're certainly seeing people sweat their assets longer because, frankly, a 5-year-old server is probably still powerful enough for a lot of your workloads. And therefore, it becomes harder to make that decision because, of course, there's the embedded carbon of a new server, but you've got to set that against the efficiency. So these sort of tools that allow you to measure are really useful. The other thing I just wanted to call out as the marketing person in the room, don't all boo at once, is that these dashboards and tools that Vern's been referencing that we talk about are not separately, they're not separate products. They're just built into what, if you're using a VMware technology, we build these in. So they're just available to you. So I'd encourage you to use them. We're not trying to flog you something here.
And it's very, very valuable. Again, I like the fact of being able to tout how well as an organization we're doing reducing green score. And these are very worth it.
I did want to say something on that. Thanks for the reminder, Vern. We have seen, so completely away from technology, we have seen within our organization the positive impact of just being public about this stuff. Everything from we literally share the percentage of our waste from kitchens in the organization that get recycled. And it has a notable effect. Each month we see, we're doing better because people see the numbers and we tell them where we're not doing so well. So our London office does way worse than our Staines office, for example. Mostly because Vern goes to London, I go to Staines. But surfacing that information really drives good behavior, and we didn't expect that when we started to do it. We were just being transparent. So I'd encourage you to look at doing that in your organizations.
Remind me about the kitchen thing as we go through our journey. We'll come back to that. I also promised within the reporting to take a look and focus on something that was not just rah, this is good for the environment, but that it has real financial implications. So I lifted these stats from the Carbon Disclosure Project. They had it up on their website. On the left, $110 trillion in investor assets. So investors, in this case, about 600 investment groups, are looking to the published reports on CDP to see how well organizations are doing before they will invest in them. So essentially that means there's 100, or there was at the time of publishing, 110, it's probably more now, $110 trillion US that investors are looking to invest, providing corporations can demonstrate that they have a good track record in meeting their carbon objectives. That's a lot of money. On the right is a different slant. It's purchasing power. So these are organizations that might be looking to partner with you, with your organization for your products and your services, but are only going to do so if they go to Carbon Disclosure Project and see that you're making progress again in tracking to your green score. Because remember, poor performance in carbon emissions on your part reflects badly on their part as their scope 3 emissions. And so it's all interrelated. Likewise, if you're looking to partner with someone, you want to make sure that they have a good track record as far as green energy is concerned. Otherwise, it reflects badly on you. So once again, this is not just good for the environment. This makes true financial sense. We promised a little bit of a chat on a journey. We're going to use our journey as an example, but we also have a slide on what some customers have done as far as carbon savings on their respective journeys. And here's where I would love for people to just jump in on the chat. Oops, my chat is behind. I want to make my chat there so I can see it. What you have done corporately on your journey. So I'm going to start with our ESG, our environmental, social, and governance report. Rory put this link in the chat. We also have it at the end of the presentation. So our ESG, remember, environmental, social governance, is broken down into sustainability, equity, and trust. And so in each of those categories for our goal, for our agenda, you call it 30 for 30. So 30 goals for 2030, 10 goals in each of sustainability, equity, and trust. And here's the example of our sustainability agenda. So each of these 10 things on the screen is something that we work towards, and to Rory's point, that we report on publicly. We talked about workload carbon efficiency. I won't go through all of these, but carbon transparency, how are we really doing with our carbon? Zero carbon clouds. We have a program by which we match customers up with cloud providers that have similar goals as far as carbon reduction is concerned. Net zero emissions. We'll have a slide to show where we got to as far as carbon neutrality is concerned. We also advocate in public forums for sustainable IP. So this is a part of our journey. This is what we published. This is the goals that we've set. We've registered with SBTI. We've registered with the Carbon Disclosure Project, and we're working and making progress towards these. Rory, do you want to comment on this?
No, just to say it's all public. Everything's available on our website. And we have, we publish what we call 30 by 30, which is 30 goals that we want to achieve by 2030, 10 each in the area of equity, sustainability, and trust.
Okay. So here's our timeline. Everyone's timeline will be different, but hopefully some of you will see things on here that you're either doing or can aspire to do or are doing more of. So this starts way back in 1998. VMware was 5 people and takes us right through to 2022. 2022 plus, when we were over 37,000 people. So here's some interesting landmarks along the way. Just a few things to call out. Here, carbon neutral. Everyone wants to be carbon neutral. So we achieved carbon neutrality in 2018, which incidentally was a couple of years before schedule. I thought that was fantastic. I mentioned science-based targets, registering with, registering with science-based targets. The Dow Jones Sustainability Index, having received kudos from CDP for making progress in our sustainability goals. So one of the things that I wanted to mention on here, here we have renewable energy powered. It's not necessarily all about the electricity and data centers. Rory's comment on recycling and composting from our kitchens. Some of you may have attended one of our conferences, VMworld, now renamed VMware Explore in the past. I remember going to one, I think it was San Francisco, could have been Vegas, where suddenly all of the utensils that were used, because we feed people breakfast and lunch. And so you can imagine a conference of 20, 30,000 people, everyone sitting down using plastic utensils. Well, one year, suddenly I noted that all of the utensils had been replaced with what's called potato-ware. So recycled compressed potatoes into forks and knives and spoons, which is entirely compostable. And just to think what a difference that one idea made as far as reducing plastic waste is concerned. So that's what it's about. That's what sustainability is about. It's not necessarily only about the electricity. It's all of these things on this chart. Rory, do you want to comment on that?
Just to add that, we also drive our exhibitors as well as ourselves to reduce the amount of swag that's given away, which is a double-edged sword, because I quite like a bit of swag here and there. But to make sure that the swag is sustainable, if you do give stuff away, and that we don't just willy-nilly throw out things in plastic bags to every attendee that walks past, but make it more meaningful.
I'm waiting for the edible shirt, so when the conference is finished, I won't have to bring the t-shirt home because I have enough t-shirts. Here's an example of what some of our customers have done as far as reducing their carbon footprint. We're bringing these up to show that it's possible. This is not just a theoretical, hey, let's raise awareness. Customers are actively doing things to reduce their carbon footprint. So carbon transparency and reporting, and I apologize, I don't know this specific customer, but 4,149 tons of carbon avoided. This one I can speak to, energy and carbon efficient infrastructure and operations. So 10% virtual machines reclaimed per annum. So yearly, this organization is a very large telco based in France, and they save on their 10% of VMs are hundreds and hundreds of virtual machines each year, reducing their carbon footprint.
We can't name them, but that color shouldn't be blue, should it?
No, it should not be blue.
You might want to mention a different color.
Too much of a giveaway.
Oh dear.
The renewable energy powered clouds, again, this goes to organizations that have been able to move either moving their VMware servers or simply using cloud native servers to reduce their CO2 emissions or CO2 equivalent emissions by 88%. Likewise, as a sustainable distributed workforce with the technologies there, reducing greenhouse gases by 50%. Again, this is here to show that it is doable. This is not just theoretical. Rory, comment on that?
I'm not going to add anything. I just, other than to say tiny fractional improvements make the difference. I think it was British Cycling that invented or talked about the idea of marginal gain.
Yes.
Very relevant here, but I'm also conscious of time, Vern. So let's keep moving.
Okay, we're in the process of winding up here. So these are the takeaways. So 3 takeaways. First, what we were just saying on the previous slide, it is possible to reduce corporate carbon footprint. To do that, execute. Choose one of those methods or come up with a completely different method. But those 4 methods certainly have worked for our customers. Choose one and be the champion of that method within your own organization. And lastly, I'll end with the quote that we started with. Please keep it in mind. Never doubt that a small group of committed citizens can change the world. Be one of those citizens. And with that, everyone, thank you very, very much for your comments in chat and for your questions and for coming out this evening. I know it's past the working day for each of you. Here's a link to sustainability at VMware, plus our Twitter, now X handles. I'm Virtual Vern at Twitter, at X. And there's Rory's Roarers. So if there's any more questions, we're happy to hang around for a bit and take a look through the chat. Otherwise, again, for myself, thank you very much.
And for me, thank you.